In a world where power shifts with knowledge and ignorance makes men slaves to others, one principle remains eternal. Those who sharpen their minds daily control their destiny. Niccolò Machiavelli knew this truth well. He was not merely a political thinker, but a strategist of survival. A man who taught that to outmaneuver rivals, you must first outlearn them. Power is not always born from the sword, nor is it always inherited through fortune or bloodline. The most enduring power, the kind that makes a man untouchable, comes from knowledge. Niccolò Machiavelli observed in his time that princes who governed not with mere brute force, but with understanding, could bend events to their will. Knowledge, to him, was not a gentle ornament, not a luxury for scholars. It was a weapon sharpened daily, hidden yet decisive in battle. And in your life, this remains the same. Think of the men around you. Some boast of their strength. Others parade their wealth. But strength fades and wealth can be stolen. Knowledge, however, once it is in your possession, becomes part of you. No thief can rob it, no tyrant can confiscate it, no enemy can neutralize it. It is a fortress built in silence, invisible to the untrained eye, but devastating when unleashed. Educating yourself daily is the act of forging this weapon, polishing it, and preparing it for the moment when you will need it most. Consider the battlefield of life today. You are surrounded by competition. Men and women alike fight for influence, recognition, opportunities, and resources. Many of them rely on charm, on connections, or on fleeting strokes of fortune. But fortune is fickle. Machiavelli himself wrote that fortune is like a woman. If you rely on her too much, she will betray you. The only safeguard against this betrayal is preparation, and the most powerful form of preparation is knowledge. When you study every day, when you educate yourself even in small increments, you are laying traps for the future. Imagine a rival who confronts you with arrogance, thinking you are weak. He expects a blunt response, a predictable move, but instead you strike with precision. You know a strategy he has never heard of. You quote wisdom he cannot counter. You apply insights that leave him disarmed. This is what knowledge as a weapon looks like, unseen until the moment of impact, then lethal. Machiavelli admired men who studied the art of war not only with weapons but with books. He praised those who read histories, who examined past rulers, who dissected victories and defeats. Why? Because history is filled with lessons, and a wise man does not need to suffer every mistake himself. He learns from others, borrowing their victories, avoiding their failures, and applying those insights to his own rise. In the same way, when you educate yourself daily, you are extending your mind into centuries past and into possibilities yet to come. You are arming yourself with the strategies of Caesar, the cunning of Alexander, the statecraft of rulers who outlived their enemies not by chance, but by intelligence. This is why daily education is not a passive act. It is not simply consuming information as a pastime. No, it is a discipline of weaponry. Each lesson you absorb is a dagger hidden beneath your cloak. Each book you read is a shield against ignorance. Each reflection you make is an arrow placed in your quiver. And when the day comes, you will be prepared to strike where others are blind. Think also of how knowledge transforms perception. A man who speaks with wisdom, who references ideas that others cannot grasp, appears larger than life. He becomes difficult to challenge, not because he is physically imposing, but because his mind creates an aura of authority. Machiavelli understood that appearances control the masses. To appear knowledgeable, to wield ideas with sharpness, is to command respect without raising your voice. Knowledge gives you this aura. It shapes the way people see you, and perception, as Machiavelli teaches, is often stronger than truth. But do not misunderstand. Knowledge alone, if left unused, is like a sword rusting in its sheath. It must be sharpened, tested, and prepared for real combat. That is why daily education matters. Not once a week, not when you feel inspired, but every single day. Each day adds a layer to your arsenal. Some days you may absorb great insights. Other days, perhaps only a single idea. But over time, these ideas multiply. They accumulate into a reservoir of power that few can match. Your rivals may not see this. They may laugh at your discipline, mock your silence, scoff at your constant study. But when they fall, when they are exposed by their ignorance, you will understand what Machiavelli meant. The true ruler, the true master of life, is not the one who waits for fortune, but the one who sharpens his mind as a soldier sharpens his blade. Knowledge makes you unpredictable. Knowledge makes you dangerous. Knowledge ensures that when others stumble blindly, you will already know where to step. Ignorance is not merely the absence of knowledge, it is the slow erosion of strength, the silent enemy that devours ambition from within. Niccolò Machiavelli warned rulers that to remain idle, to stop learning, is to invite ruin. For a prince who ceases to sharpen his understanding becomes like a sword left unattended. It grows dull, unfit for battle, unworthy of command. The same holds true for you. When you stop educating yourself, when you surrender to routine and comfort, you begin the process of your own downfall. Stagnation is the quiet assassin. It does not strike suddenly with visible force, but rather creeps in unnoticed, disguising itself as peace, as contentment, as the illusion that you have already learned enough. But beneath that illusion lies decay. Machiavelli observed that men who believed themselves secure in power were often the first to fall, because they no longer sought improvement. They trusted in yesterday's victories while their enemies studied and adapted. And when the moment of challenge arrived, they were exposed, weak and unprepared. In life, this same law governs your path. The world does not wait for you. It advances, shifts, and evolves every day. If you remain still, you are not standing in place, you are falling behind. Your rivals are not sleeping. They are reading, listening, observing, and adapting. They are sharpening their minds while you sit in comfort. Machiavelli would say that the man who neglects learning allows himself to become predictable. And predictability is the death of power. For when others can anticipate your every move, you are already defeated. Consider the nature of ambition. When it is alive, it burns like a fire. It drives you to question, to search, to strive. But if that fire is not fed with fuel, it diminishes. And the fuel of ambition is knowledge. Without fresh ideas, without new perspectives, without the discipline of constant education, your fire turns to ash. You may not notice at first. You may still walk with pride, still speak with confidence, but slowly your words lose weight. Your actions lose sharpness. Your mind, once agile, grows sluggish. That is stagnation, the slow, invisible decay that destroys more men than open defeat. Machiavelli often studied how rulers fell not because of sudden enemies, but because of their own laziness. They trusted too much in what they already knew. They assumed yesterday's wisdom would be enough for tomorrow's battles. But wars change, people change, circumstances shift. A prince who fails to adapt to new realities is doomed. And in your own life, if you cling to old habits, old knowledge, old ways of thinking, while the world evolves around you, you too will be left behind, mocked by those who outgrew you. This is why daily education is not merely about growth. It is about survival. It is the antidote to stagnation. When you read, when you reflect, when you deliberately seek new knowledge, you disrupt the comfort that would otherwise enslave you. You remind yourself that you are unfinished, that your mind can still expand, that your power can still sharpen. Machiavelli understood that a wise ruler must always be learning, not because he is weak, but because he refuses to become vulnerable. Think also of perception. A stagnant man is easy to see. His conversations repeat themselves. His ideas feel stale. His presence lacks vitality. People may not always articulate it, but they sense it. They begin to respect him less, to see him as outdated, irrelevant, even though he may still hold wealth or status. Meanwhile, the man who educates himself daily radiates energy. He surprises others with fresh insights. He adapts with speed. He cannot be dismissed because his mind is alive, and the living mind commands attention. Machiavelli would argue that in politics, stagnation is fatal because it invites challenge. A ruler who grows complacent signals to rivals that he is unprepared, and once rivals sense weakness, they attack. The same is true in personal life. When you stagnate, you invite others to overtake you. You leave gaps for them to exploit. You make yourself vulnerable, not by accident, but by negligence. Even worse, stagnation disguises itself as rest. You tell yourself you have earned the pause, that you deserve the comfort, that what you already know is sufficient. But Machiavelli would whisper in your ear, this is the moment you are most in danger. For enemies wait for you to relax, for rivals wait for you to soften, for fortune itself waits for you to let your guard down. And once you do, the attack comes, swift and merciless. To fight stagnation is to accept that education is not a phase, not a chapter in youth, but a lifelong discipline. Machiavelli studied until his final days, writing, observing, questioning. He knew that the moment a man believes he has nothing left to learn, he begins his descent. The world belongs to those who remain students, not because they are ignorant, but because they are wise enough to know ignorance is never fully defeated. Machiavelli understood a truth that most men never dare to accept. It is not necessary to be wise in all things, but it is necessary to appear wise. The world does not judge by what is hidden, it judges by what is seen. Men cannot open your skull to measure the weight of your thoughts. They can only listen to your words, watch your actions, and form an image of you. And in this image lies power. A ruler, Machiavelli argued, need not possess every virtue. He need only appear virtuous when circumstances demand it. In the same way, you may not know everything. You may not be the most brilliant. You may not even have original thoughts. But if you educate yourself daily, if you borrow wisdom from others and present it with conviction, you will appear formidable. And appearance, in the realm of influence, is often stronger than truth. Think of the effect this creates. A man who quotes history, who recalls lessons from philosophy, who can reference ideas beyond the ordinary, instantly seems greater than his peers. Others assume he has depth, that his mind is vast, that he sees what they cannot. They respect him not because they know the full extent of his knowledge, but because he projects authority. Machiavelli would call this the theater of power, the art of shaping perception. By studying daily, by gathering insights from books, mentors, and experiences, you accumulate weapons of appearance. You cloak yourself in the aura of wisdom, even if that wisdom is borrowed. Some may call this deception, but Machiavelli would call it strategy. Power is not about exposing your limitations, it is about hiding them. When you speak with certainty, when you frame borrowed knowledge as part of your arsenal, people will rarely question its origin. They will not ask whether the idea was born in your mind or in the writings of Seneca, Aristotle, or Machiavelli himself. What matters is that you brought it forth at the right moment, with confidence, and it struck its target. This is why daily education becomes essential. You are not merely filling your mind for personal satisfaction. You are building a library of borrowed brilliance that you can unleash in conversations, negotiations, debates, and conflicts. A story from history here, a principle from philosophy there, a financial insight at another moment. All of these pieces, when stitched together, give the illusion of mastery. And in this world, illusion often accomplishes more than reality. Consider how rulers were judged in Machiavelli's time. The people did not demand to see their ledgers or their daily thoughts. They watched how they spoke in public, how they carried themselves, how they responded to crises. A prince who looked confident, who appeared learned, was trusted, even if his private chambers were filled with doubt. The people do not care for the unseen. They care only for what they perceive. Thus, to appear wise is to command the loyalty and respect of others, even if behind the curtain you are still learning, still stumbling. still piecing together fragments of understanding. There is great freedom in this. You do not need to master every subject to wield authority. You need only learn enough every day to present yourself as informed, thoughtful, and composed. Machiavelli would insist that education gives you the material for this illusion, and confidence is the performance that brings it to life. The two together form a mask of wisdom that others will believe without question. And once they believe, you have influence over their choices, their trust, and their respect. But remember, appearing wise is not about arrogance. It is not about pretending to know everything. It is about precision. The man who appears wise is careful with his words. He does not speak constantly, but when he does, he leaves impact. He selects from the arsenal of knowledge he has gathered, whether from books or observation, and delivers it with timing that makes others pause. This creates the aura of depth. People begin to think, if he speaks so powerfully on this, how much more must he know that he has not yet revealed? That is the spell you cast. And here lies the brilliance of borrowing wisdom. You may not have lived through centuries of battles, but you can study them and speak of them as though you were present. You may not have written great treatises on politics, but you can extract their lessons and apply them as if they were your own. You may not have created the strategies of finance, but you can understand them well enough to act decisively in money matters. This is not theft, this is inheritance. Humanity has left you a treasury of wisdom, and Machiavelli would scorn the man who leaves it untouched. To refuse borrowed wisdom is to choose poverty of the mind when wealth lies in abundance before you. Think also of how this appearance shapes alliances. Men are drawn to those they believe are wiser than themselves. They seek guidance, they offer loyalty, they defer their judgment. If you educate yourself daily, if you collect and display wisdom consistently, you become the axis around which others turn. They may not even realize it, but they will yield to your presence, because your appearance of wisdom convinces them that resistance is foolish. This is the silent conquest of influence. Not with armies, not with gold, but with perception. And perception, when managed with care, becomes reality in the minds of those who follow it. Machiavelli knew that men are governed more by what they believe than by what they know. To appear wise is to shape their belief, and to educate yourself daily, even if you rely on borrowed wisdom, ensures that you always have the tools to maintain this powerful illusion. Books are powerful, knowledge is essential, but Machiavelli knew that the greatest school is life itself. A man who reads without observing the world is like a soldier who studies maps but never sets foot on the battlefield. The true strategist does not simply consume knowledge, he transforms every experience, whether it is victory, betrayal, or humiliation, into a lesson. For Machiavelli, experience was not random, it was raw material to be forged into wisdom, and wisdom was the currency of survival. Think of how he lived. Exiled from Florence, stripped of influence, Machiavelli did not sink into despair. Instead, he studied men. He observed their loyalties, their greed, their ambitions. He listened to the lies they told, the excuses they made, the masks they wore. From this, he wrote his greatest works, not as theory, but as reflections of lived reality. He turned exile into a classroom, failure into instruction, humiliation into insight. That is the Machiavellian way. Every moment, no matter how bitter, becomes a teacher. The same law applies to your life. Each day you are presented with experiences. Some are small, almost invisible, others strike you with force. The foolish man dismisses them, moves past them without reflection, repeating the same mistakes again and again. The wise man, however, pauses. He studies the moment. He asks, what did this reveal about human nature? What did it teach me about myself? What hidden law of power lies beneath this event? In that act of reflection, experience transforms into strategy. A betrayal, for example, is not just an act of pain. It is a window into trust, loyalty, and weakness. The The sting of betrayal teaches you who cannot be relied upon, but more importantly, it teaches you how betrayal is orchestrated. You begin to see the signs before it comes. You recognize the smile that hides deceit, the silence that signals disloyalty. From one betrayal, you gain a shield against many. Machiavelli would insist that you do not waste such lessons. For every scar you ignore is an advantage you surrender. Similarly, failure is not the end, but the most brutal and effective teacher. When you fail, the world strips away illusions. You see where you were blind, where you were arrogant, where you misjudged. The foolish man wallows in shame. The wise man dissects the failure like a surgeon, examining each detail until the truth is uncovered. That truth then becomes armor. You may fall once, but if you reflect, you will not fall the same way again. Failure, in this sense, is education carved into your very flesh. Even small experiences contain lessons if you know how to extract them. A simple conversation may reveal more than pages of philosophy. A careless word may expose insecurity. A gesture may uncover hidden ambition. The man who pays attention, who trains himself to read the subtleties of experience, carries an advantage over the one who merely looks but does not see. Machiavelli would remind you that politics, power, and survival are games of perception, and perception is sharpened not by theory alone, but by lived encounters. This is why daily education must extend beyond books. You must treat life itself as a constant text, written in human behavior, in conflict, in change. Every insult you endure, every compliment you receive, every deal you strike, every loss you suffer, these are pages in your private book of power. The question is whether you will read them or ignore them. Consider the man who never reflects. He is struck by the same insult again and again, each time shocked, each time wounded, because he never asks why. He is betrayed by similar men, falls into similar traps because he refuses to study the patterns of experience. Such a man is destined to be ruled, never ruling. Meanwhile, the Machiavellian student of life, even if wounded once, learns enough to avoid the same blade twice. He watches, remembers, adapts. He turns what could have been wasted pain into permanent strength. Reflection is the key. Without reflection, experiences are meaningless. They pass like shadows, leaving no trace. With reflection, however, even a single encounter can reshape your understanding of power. This is why Machiavelli himself wrote letters, kept notes, and analyzed every event. He treated his own life as a laboratory of strategy. You must do the same. Do not let experiences fade. Capture them, dissect them, harvest their meaning, and store them in your arsenal. Think of it as building a private treasury of wisdom. Every experience, once examined, becomes a coin added to your vault. Over time, this treasury grows vast, richer than wealth, stronger than muscle, and unlike gold, no man can steal it. Experience, once turned into a lesson, becomes yours forever. It sharpens your instincts, shapes your decisions, and arms you against future uncertainty. This is also how experience distinguishes leaders from followers. The follower endures life passively, repeating errors without change. The leader transforms life into strategy, turning wounds into wisdom, turning losses into leverage. Machiavelli would remind you that fortune favors not those who suffer, but those who extract meaning from suffering. To live without reflection is to wander blind. To reflect daily is to walk with the torch of clarity, seeing traps before they close, seeing opportunities before others notice. Machiavelli knew that great empires were never built in a single moment. The walls of Florence, the rise of Rome, the strength of kingdoms, all were constructed brick by brick, decision by decision, day by day. He understood that the path to enduring power is not forged through sudden bursts of brilliance, but through relentless small actions, each one adding weight, each one sharpening the blade. In life, it is not the dramatic gestures that make a man formidable, but the disciplined accumulation of small steps that, over time, become unstoppable momentum. Think of a soldier preparing for war. He does not master his weapon in a single night. He trains every day, repeating the same motions, striking, defending, perfecting his craft until it becomes instinct. On the battlefield, it is not talent that saves him but discipline. Not a single stroke of genius, but the daily practice that now lives in his muscles. Education, self-mastery, and power operate in the same way. You do not transform yourself in an instant. You forge yourself slowly, deliberately, by investing in small steps that others dismiss as trivial. Machiavelli would argue that fortune itself favors those who prepare in increments. A prince who reads history daily, who reflects each morning, who studies the habits of his rivals, is building an arsenal of understanding. At first, these actions seem insignificant. A single page, a single observation, a single note. But over months and years, they create a reservoir of strength that appears sudden to others. Though it was patiently cultivated in silence, men will call it luck or genius, when in truth it was persistence. This principle applies to all domains of life. Consider knowledge. You may not have hours to devour entire volumes, but you have minutes to absorb an idea. That idea, repeated daily, compounds. Within a year, you have read what others avoided. Within 5 years, your wisdom outpaces theirs by miles. Or think of influence: a single conversation, a single act of charm, a single display of competence. Small acts that seem invisible, but with repetition, they shape reputation, and reputation is the foundation of power. Most men fail because they seek shortcuts. They chase grand victories, sudden leaps, dramatic transformations. But such things rarely last. A man who relies on luck is destroyed when luck shifts. A man who builds on spectacle collapses when the crowd turns away. Machiavelli warns us against these illusions. He teaches that lasting power belongs to those who move steadily, strategically, accumulating advantage piece by piece until no rival can match the fortress they have built. Reflect on how this principle protects you from despair. Life will test you with setbacks, with failures, with long stretches where progress feels invisible. The man who expects greatness instantly collapses under such weight, but the man who trusts in small steps does not falter. He knows that every lesson, every discipline, every repetition, though small today, is preparing him for tomorrow's battles. His rivals, impatient and reckless, burn themselves out chasing sudden triumph. He, meanwhile, advances quietly, steadily, until he stands above them without effort. Machiavelli himself embodied this principle. In exile, he did not waste his days mourning what he lost. Instead, he wrote, he studied. Each day he sharpened his mind with letters and books, reflecting on politics and human behavior. At the time, it seemed he was powerless, forgotten, irrelevant. Yet these small steps became the foundation of the prince, the very work that would immortalize him. His power, though hidden, was building silently in the shadows, and when revealed, it was immense. Understand, this greatness is the harvest of patience. The world often celebrates sudden victories, but true victories are cultivated in obscurity. Your small steps, invisible to others, are silently reshaping you. Each page you read, each observation you write, each reflection you make is adding to the weight of your arsenal. You may not see the full power yet, but it is gathering like a storm behind the horizon. When it finally breaks, others will call it sudden, though you will know it was earned daily. This is why discipline matters more than inspiration. Inspiration is fleeting, discipline is permanent. The man who acts only when motivated will rise and fall like the tide. The man who commits to small steps every day, regardless of mood, builds a foundation so solid that nothing can shake it. Machiavelli would remind you that rulers do not wait for feelings to guide them. They act from necessity, from discipline, from strategy. To educate yourself daily, even in small measures, is to act like a ruler over your own destiny. Think of reputation again. You do not become respected overnight. You earn respect through consistent demonstration of wisdom, composure, and reliability. One act of cleverness may impress, but only repeated acts build the image of true authority. The world trusts patterns, not moments. This is why small steps matter. They create patterns that others cannot ignore. Slowly, without realizing it, people begin to see you as dependable, as knowledgeable, as someone who commands gravity in every room. That reputation, once established, is itself a fortress that protects you from rivals. And what of mastery? Mastery is nothing more than the relentless repetition of small steps over time. The artist who paints each day, the thinker who writes each morning, the strategist who studies each night, each accumulates an advantage invisible to the lazy. By the time their rivals notice, it is too late. The gap has grown unbridgeable. Machiavelli would call this foresight, the ability to act now in small ways that secure great power later. To wait until the crisis arrives is foolish. To prepare daily is wise. Listen carefully, because this is where the pursuit of knowledge transforms from being a passive act of self-improvement into an active instrument of dominance. Machiavelli, in his unflinching wisdom, did not view education as some noble ornament or gentle pastime. He viewed it as a weapon, a sharpened blade in the arsenal of those who wish to rise above others. To educate yourself every day is not merely to acquire facts, but to arm yourself with the intellectual artillery necessary to command, to persuade, and to outmaneuver those who rest comfortably in ignorance. Think of it like the soldier who neglects to sharpen his sword. On the battlefield, when the clash comes, he finds his weapon dull and useless. He may possess bravery, even passion, but he lacks the edge to cut through his enemy. So too with the mind. If you walk into the arena of life armed only with yesterday's knowledge, you are already defeated by those who trained harder, thought deeper, and anticipated better. Education, pursued relentlessly, ensures that your blade remains sharp when others' weapons grow brittle with time. But let us strip away the illusion that education must always be gentle, orderly, or sanctioned by institutions. No, the most powerful form of learning is not handed to you neatly bound in books. It is ripped from the world itself. It is forged in the observation of men, in the scrutiny of politics, in the cold analysis of betrayal, victory, and downfall. Every interaction teaches, every event instructs, and every rival exposes his weakness for you to study. If you ignore these lessons, you betray yourself. If you embrace them, you become dangerous. Consider how rulers throughout history held power. It was not simply through armies, wealth, or birthright. It was through knowing more about their enemies, their allies, their subjects, and even themselves. A prince who educates himself daily is never surprised, because he has already anticipated the schemes of others. He knows human nature, its vanity, its greed, its hunger for flattery, its fear of isolation. And with this knowledge, he manipulates, bends, and directs the will of others as a master bends iron. Education becomes a weapon precisely because most men misuse it. They acquire knowledge and parade it as vanity, speaking of it to impress others but failing to apply it with strategy. They learn but do not wield. Machiavelli would scoff at such folly. What is the use of philosophy, history, or strategy if you cannot apply it to gain an advantage? Knowledge unused is like a sword kept in its scabbard while enemies surround you. To educate yourself every day is not merely to collect ideas, but to practice the art of turning those ideas into instruments of control. Now imagine two men walking into a negotiation. One has learned only the words of his trade, while the other has studied not only the terms of business, but also the psychology of manipulation, the rhetoric of persuasion, the hidden triggers of greed and fear. Who do you think will emerge with the better deal? The ignorant man may think himself clever, but the educated one, who sharpened his intellect daily, plays with him as a predator toys with prey. This is the difference between knowledge as decoration and knowledge as weapon. Daily education also gives you adaptability. Power belongs to those who can adjust quickly when the world changes, and the world is always changing. Those who stop learning become rigid, like old stone walls that eventually crumble under the weight of time. but those who feed their mind with new strategies, fresh insights, and evolving tactics bend like iron heated in the forge. They adapt, reshape, and remain unbroken. It is this flexibility that ensures survival, and more than survival, it ensures dominance. Machiavelli would tell you that in politics and life, appearances are often stronger than reality. But what fuels the ability to control appearances? Knowledge. The man who educates himself daily knows which mask to wear, when to speak, when to stay silent, and when to strike. He reads people as though they were open books, because he has studied hundreds like them before. And when the moment comes to seize an opportunity, his knowledge makes his hand steady while others hesitate. Do not think of education as gentle reading by candlelight. Think of it as loading a weapon, preparing for a war you may not yet see, but will inevitably fight. Each lesson, each piece of wisdom, each insight is a bullet chambered, a blade sharpened, a shield reinforced. When you educate yourself every day, you are not simply expanding your mind, you are constructing a fortress and an arsenal within it. Those who neglect this daily practice walk unarmed into battle, confident in their ignorance, and they will fall swiftly when confronted by those who prepared. So ask yourself, as Machiavelli would demand, do you educate yourself as though your survival depends on it? Because it does. The pursuit of knowledge is not a luxury. It is the foundation of strength, the root of cunning, and the difference between ruling and being ruled. To learn each day is to grow stronger each day, and to grow stronger is to ensure that when the moment of power presents itself, you will be ready to seize it. Power does not belong to the idle, the complacent, or those who wait for the world to grant them favor. Power belongs to the vigilant, the disciplined, and above all, the educated. Machiavelli's wisdom teaches us that success is not a gift, but a conquest. Taken daily through the sharpening of the mind, the strengthening of perception, and the mastery of human nature. To educate yourself every day is to choose not to remain ordinary. It is to rise above the masses who surrender themselves to distraction, who live by chance rather than design. Every lesson you acquire, every insight you seize, every truth you uncover becomes a stone in the fortress of your power. While others drift aimlessly, you march forward with clarity, armed with knowledge that cannot be stolen, deceived, or destroyed. Machiavelli knew that fortune favors the prepared mind, and preparation is the fruit of relentless learning. When you read, when you observe, when you dissect the motives of others, you do more than collect information. You build an empire of thought, and from this empire, you govern your actions with precision. You protect yourself against manipulation, and you exert influence over those who mistake ignorance for safety. So remember this: every day you neglect education, you weaken yourself. Every day you feed your mind, you sharpen your weapon. The world is not forgiving, and ignorance is no shield. It is the very rope your enemies will use to strangle you. But knowledge, cultivated daily, transforms you into a force that cannot be easily undermined, a figure that others must respect, fear, or follow. Educate yourself, not for comfort, but for power. Not for vanity, but for survival. Not for appearances, but for mastery. This is Machiavelli's strategy. Hidden success lies not in luck or fate, but in the relentless training of the mind, until knowledge itself becomes your greatest instrument of conquest.